and we're looking around how fucking maniacal people are and how crazy the world is. We were like,
The camera crew from CBS arrived at Wounded Knee, South Dakota, on March 3, 1973. They expected to find a protest. They found a war zone. Armored personnel carriers ringed a tiny hamlet. FBI snipers held the ridgeline. And behind the barricades, holding a Winchester rifle he barely knew how to use, stood a 33-year-old man who, 3 years earlier, had been teaching wealthy women in San Francisco how to do the foxtrot. His name was Russell Means, ballroom dance instructor, public accountant, rodeo hand, janitor, and now, somehow, the most wanted Indian in America, a man the federal government would try to imprison, shoot, stab, and silence for the next 2 decades. They failed at all of it. And then, Hollywood came calling. Number 1, the Foxtrot Revolutionary. Russell Charles Means was born on November 10, 1939, in Porcupine, South Dakota, a cluster of houses on the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation, so small it barely registered on a map. His father, Walter Hank Means, was Oglala Lakota. His mother, Theodora Louise Feather, was Yankton, Dakota, from Greenwood. She gave him a Lakota name at birth, Wangbli O Brave Eagle. He was the oldest of 4 boys, including twins William and Theodore. Pine Ridge in the early 1940s was one of the poorest places in the United States. When Russell was 3, the family left for the San Francisco Bay Area, chasing wartime shipyard work at Mare Island in Vallejo. California was supposed to be the fresh start. It wasn't. Russell grew up caught between worlds. Too Indian for white suburbia, too urban for the reservation. His father was an alcoholic. Russell endured racial taunts, scraped through school, and barely graduated from San Leandro High in 1958. He tried 4 different colleges and never finished any of them. In his autobiography, he was blunt about what came next: truancy, crime, drugs, and the slow erosion of everything that connected him to who he was supposed to be. Through most of the 1960s, what Means called his "I don't give a damn" years, he drifted across the West, burning through jobs at a pace that defied belief. Rodeo hand, cowboy, janitor, printer, day laborer, computer operator, assistant golf professional, advertising clerk, public accountant. And then the one that stops you cold, ballroom dance instructor, San Francisco's Mission District. The man who would spend the rest of his life staring down federal marshals was teaching the waltz and the foxtrot to paying customers. He bounced between Los Angeles, San Francisco, and Phoenix before landing at the Rosebud Reservation. That's where everything changed. Means developed severe vertigo and went to the reservation clinic. The doctors took one look at him, an Indian man stumbling around, and assumed he was drunk. They refused to examine him. For days, by the time anyone bothered, an untreated ear infection had destroyed the hearing in his left ear, permanently. The system built to protect him had dismissed him as just another drunk Indian. Russell Means stopped drifting that day. His radicalism didn't come from nowhere. In March 1964, his father Hank and a handful of Lakota men had staged a 24-hour occupation of Alcatraz Island, citing the 1868 Treaty of Fort Laramie. Any abandoned federal property, they argued, reverted to the tribes. It lasted 1 day. Nobody noticed. But Russell was watching. Hank died in January 1967. A year later, Russell met Dennis Banks in Cleveland, co-founder of a brand new organization called the American Indian Movement. By 1970, Means was AIM's first national director. He had a gift that made him dangerous to the establishment, not violence, but spectacle. He understood something most protest leaders never figured out. The camera was the most powerful weapon an Indian could carry. Thanksgiving Day, 1970, he seized the Mayflower II replica at Plymouth and helped paint Plymouth Rock red. 1971. A prayer vigil on top of Mount Rushmore itself, forcing Americans to stare at Lakota sacred land carved with the faces of presidents who had shattered every treaty they signed. The Black Hills, Pahasapa, had been guaranteed to the Lakota in the 1868 Treaty of Fort Laramie. The government took them anyway when gold was discovered. Means stood on the carved heads and made the evening news. That was the point. In January 1972, he filed a $9 million group libel lawsuit against the Cleveland Indians and owner Vernon Stouffer over the Chief Wahoo mascot. His argument was devastating. Would America tolerate a team called the Cleveland Negroes? Would they slap a caricature of a black face on a baseball cap and sell it as entertainment? The suit dragged on for more than a decade and settled in 1983 for roughly $35,000. The team kept the name for decades, but Means had planted the argument that would eventually force the change. He didn't live to see it, but he started it. Number 2. The Road to Wounded Knee. In February 1972, an Oglala Lakota man named Raymond Yellow Thunder walked into a bar in Gordon, Nebraska. A group of white men seized him, stripped him from the waist down, and shoved him into an American Legion dance for the crowd's amusement. They threw him out. 8 days later, he was found dead. Local authorities called it exposure. They showed zero interest in investigating. Means and Banks arrived with more than 1,000 Indians and occupied the town of Gordon until a second autopsy was ordered. It showed Yellow Thunder had been beaten to death. Manslaughter convictions followed. For the first time, AIM had connected with the raw desperation of reservation life. The people of Pine Ridge had seen what this organization could do when it showed up with cameras and refused to leave. That fall, Means helped lead the Trail of Broken Treaties, a cross-country caravan of Native activists from dozens of tribes that rolled into Washington, D.C. in November 1972, carrying a 20-point manifesto demanding treaty reform, land restoration, and an end to the termination policies that had been gutting tribal sovereignty for decades. Federal officials had promised meetings. When the caravan arrived, those promises evaporated. So AIM did what AIM did. They occupied the Bureau of Indian Affairs headquarters for roughly a week and caused more than $2 million in damage. Nixon's people scrambled to end it, handing over about $66,000 in travel money and promising to review every one of the 20 points. They never did, and Russell Means learned a lesson he would carry for the rest of his life. The United States government would negotiate with you only when you gave them no other choice. Number 3. 71 days. On February 27, 1973, Russell Means, Dennis Banks, and roughly 200 armed AIM activists and Oglala Lakota people seized the tiny hamlet of Wounded Knee, South Dakota, the site of the 1890 massacre where the U.S. 7th Cavalry had slaughtered more than 200 men, women, and children. Means was forcing America to stare at the place where its promises had died and to watch it happen all over again on live television. The demands were specific. Remove Dick Wilson, the corrupt chairman of the Oglala Sioux tribe, and honor the broken treaties. The government's response was staggering. FBI agents, U.S. Marshals, BIA police, they surrounded the hamlet with armored personnel carriers, military helicopters, and enough ammunition to level a small town. Roadblocks went up on every road in or out. The entire Pine Ridge Reservation became a militarized zone. For 71 days, it was a shooting war. Firefights erupted after dark. Negotiations started and collapsed and started again. Supplies were smuggled through government lines at night by supporters who risked federal charges just to bring food and medicine. 2 Native men, Frank Clearwater, a Cherokee from North Carolina, and Buddy Lamont, an Oglala from Pine Ridge, were killed by federal gunfire. A U.S. Marshal named Lloyd Grimm was shot and permanently paralyzed. Russell Means became the face of the occupation. He was behind the barricades every single day and on the evening news every single night, delivering statements with a calm fury that made federal officials furious. They couldn't ignore him, they couldn't shut him up, and they couldn't figure out how to end the standoff without creating martyrs. For 71 days, the most powerful government on earth could not dislodge 200 Indians from a patch of South Dakota dirt. The siege ended May 8, 1973. Means and Banks surrendered. They faced charges that could have put them away for decades. The trial opened in St. Paul, Minnesota, in 1974 and lasted 9 months. The prosecution threw hundreds of witnesses and thousands of pages of evidence at them. It should have been overwhelming. Instead, U.S. District Judge Fred Nickel threw out every charge. FBI agents had been caught coaching witnesses. Evidence had been tampered with. Wiretaps run without warrants. Nickel said the misconduct had polluted the waters of justice and openly questioned whether the FBI could be trusted to prosecute anyone. But the government wasn't finished. Over the next several years, Means stood trial roughly a dozen times. Assault, conspiracy, everything they could choose, throw at him. Acquitted or charges dismissed in nearly every case. The pattern became almost absurd. Charge him, try him, lose, charge him again. He was shot 3 separate times, once in the abdomen by a BIA officer, once when a bullet grazed his forehead in a drive-by, once in the chest in what he called an assassination attempt, 3 gunshot wounds. He survived all 3. In 1975, he was convicted on a felony riot charge from a Sioux Falls courthouse clash and served about a year in the South Dakota State Penitentiary. While inside, a fellow inmate stabbed him. He survived that too. South Dakota Governor Bill Janklow didn't pardon him until 2003, nearly 30 years later. Number 4. The Libertarian Warrior and Andy Warhol's Indian. Here is the contradiction that nobody could explain. This armed revolutionary, the most wanted Indian in America, a man who had faced down the FBI in a 71-day siege, became a committed libertarian. Not a Democrat, not a Republican. He believed the government that broke every treaty, stole every acre, and tried to erase every culture had no business running anyone's life, Indian or white. In 1976, Andy Warhol chose Means as the subject of his American Indian portrait series. The gallery paid AIM $5,000 in exchange for Means' sitting. Warhol produced 38 paintings and 23 drawings. One hangs in the Denver Art Museum. Others have sold at auction for hundreds of thousands. The armed revolutionary was now a permanent fixture in American pop art. And the contradictions were only getting stranger. In 1983, he agreed to be the running mate of Hustler magazine publisher Larry Flynt in Flynt's quixotic presidential campaign. Then, in September 1987, Means made his own serious run, the Libertarian Party's presidential nomination at their national convention in Seattle. On the first ballot, he finished second with 120 votes, 31%, losing to a Texas congressman named Ron Paul, who took 196, 76 votes. That's all that separated the warrior of Wounded Knee from a presidential nomination. 2 decades later, in January 2012, Means endorsed Ron Paul for president. The two men had been philosophical allies the entire time. He also ran for Oglala Sioux tribal president in 1974, challenging the same Dick Wilson he'd tried to remove at Wounded Knee, and lost by a disputed margin of more than 200 votes, amid credible reports of voter intimidation. In 2001, he ran as an independent for governor of New Mexico, but was kept off the ballot on procedural grounds. In 2004, he ran for tribal president again, losing to Cecilia Firethunder, the first woman ever elected to that office. Russell Means never won an election in his life. He won everything else. And in December 2007, he pulled his most audacious stunt yet. He and a small delegation went to Washington and formally declared the Republic of Lakota, withdrawing from all U.S. treaties and claiming sovereignty over parts of 5 states. No government recognized it. No elected tribal council supported it. Russell Means didn't care. He'd spent his entire life being told what was impossible. Number 5. The Airport. In 1992, director Michael Mann was casting The Last of the Mohicans, a big-budget historical epic starring Daniel Day-Lewis. Mann had started his career making documentaries. He remembered AIM. He told his casting director, Bonnie Timmerman, to track down Russell Means and Dennis Banks and see if they could perform. Means was invited to audition. He refused to pay his own airfare. The production sent a ticket. He showed up at the airport, looked at the ticket, and saw it was Coach. He turned around and walked away. A 51-year-old man with no acting career, no agent, no connections, and no reason to believe another opportunity would ever come, walked away from the biggest moment of his life because of a seat assignment. He later said, "Well, there goes my movie career." The production panicked. They sent a limousine, upgraded the ticket. After 4 separate auditions, Means won the role of Chingachgook, the last of the Mohicans himself. An acting coach told him the first rule of acting was to never act. For a man who had spent his entire life refusing to be anyone other than exactly who he was, it was the easiest instruction he'd ever received. On set, he was exactly who he'd always been, a man who would not tolerate disrespect. He discovered that Mann had hired more than 900 Native American extras from tribes across the country and was housing them in squalid conditions, paying roughly $60 to $70 a day. Means organized a strike. By his own account, he negotiated the wages up to about $100 a day and forced the production to improve housing. He clashed with Mann over what he called the Huron village scene, a sequence he condemned as a racist recycling of the African village scene from old jungle movies. and demanded rewrites. When Mann swore at him during the canoe chase filming, Means walked off the set. Producers blockaded him in his trailer. The dispute was over a promised $25,000 out of the net, and Means, the former accountant, knew that net profits in Hollywood meant nothing. He demanded payment up front. When a producer threatened to blacklist him, Means delivered one of the great lines in Hollywood labor history. "You tell me how many parts are for 51-year-old Indian actors. You don't scare me." They paid him. He finished the film. He adopted his co-star Eric Schweig, who played his son in the Lakota way. Schweig was Inuit, adopted into a white family, struggling with that displacement his entire life. Means recognized something in him. He became genuinely close with Daniel Day-Lewis, later visiting him in Ireland. The militant and the method actor found common ground. Both were men who refused to pretend. The Last of the Mohicans became a massive hit. Russell Means, at 51 years old, had a second career. Number 6. From Wounded Knee to Pocahontas. 3 years later, Disney cast the militant who had occupied federal buildings as the voice of Chief Powhatan in Pocahontas. Means loved it. He called it the best film Hollywood had ever made about Indians. Think about what that means. The man who had painted Plymouth Rock red, faced down the FBI with a rifle, and declared his own sovereign nation was now voicing a character in a Disney animated musical. And he was proud of it. He appeared in Oliver Stone's Natural Born Killers in 1994. He played Jim Thorpe in Windrunner, Sitting Bull in the CBS miniseries Buffalo Girls in 1995, Arrowhead in The Pathfinder, his second James Fenimore Cooper adaptation. He appeared in the 2007 Viking film Pathfinder and guest starred on Walker, Texas Ranger, Nash Bridges, and Touched by an Angel. In 2004, he showed up on HBO's Curb Your Enthusiasm as Wandering Bear, proving the warrior of Wounded Knee could play comedy. His final roles, Benjamin Longshadow in the television series Banshee and Big Jim in Days and Nights, were released after his death. His son Tatanka Means followed him into acting and later appeared in Martin Scorsese's Killers of the Flower Moon. Means was also a musician who invented a genre he called rap ajo, rock, hip-hop, and protest, blended together. His 1993 album Electric Warrior on Sound of America Records featured tracks like Wounded Knee Set Us Free and Indian Cars Go Far. A second album, The Radical, included the incendiary Waco, The White Man's Wounded Knee. He received a Native American Music Awards Hall of Fame honor in 2013. In 1995, he published his autobiography, Where White Men Fear to Tread, co-written with Marvin J. Wolfe. Nearly 600 pages of American history told from behind the barricades. His personal life was as turbulent as his public one. 5 marriages, the first 4 ending in divorce. His fourth wife, Gloria Grant, was a Navajo educator and former rodeo rider, mother of Tatanka. His fifth wife, Pearl Daniel Means, married him in 1999 and stayed until the end. 10 children total, 7 biological, 3 adopted in the Lakota tradition. Number 7. The death penalty. In August 2011, Russell Means was diagnosed with inoperable esophageal cancer. True to everything he'd ever been, he rejected mainstream medicine. He chose traditional Lakota remedies and alternative treatments. By December 2011, he announced to the press that he had beaten it, that he had beaten what he called the death penalty. He hadn't. His health broke down through 2012. On October 22nd, at 72 years old, Russell Means died at his ranch in Porcupine, South Dakota, the same Pine Ridge reservation where he'd been born 72 years earlier. The family said, "Our dad and husband now walks among our ancestors." He was cremated. His ashes were scattered in the Black Hills, Paha Sapa, the sacred land the government had taken when gold was found, the land he'd stood on top of Mount Rushmore to reclaim, the land he'd declared a sovereign nation to protect, the land he'd fought for from the barricades of Wounded Knee to the courtrooms of St. Paul to a Hollywood soundstage where he refused to sit in a chair that wasn't worthy of him. NPR compared him to Sitting Bull and Crazy Horse. The difference is, those men fought with weapons that could kill. Russell Means fought with something the government never figured out how to stop: a camera, a microphone, and the complete refusal to sit in any seat someone else assigned him. Coach, reservation, prison cell, or Hollywood trailer, it didn't matter. Russell Means would rather walk away from everything than accept a position that was beneath him. If this story moved you, hit that subscribe button. We tell stories the history books tried to bury, and you don't want to miss what's coming next.